of that standpoint. I do believe very strongly that there's a difference between use, abuse, and then addiction. And I don't think people really understand that continuum of those three levels of exposure to drugs, which is, by the way, a very public health model and not really an addiction model. People that believe in the full disease theory of addiction and the disease theory only believe that people are born genetically with an alcoholic personality, and therefore if they're exposed to alcohol will become an alcoholic no matter what. I don't really believe that's true. I think that that's true for some people. Some people are very, very highly disposed to having an inability to tolerate alcohol, but I think there's a lot of people that are progressive in their addiction, and excessive use leads to tolerance, then addiction. We're going to take a break, Barbara. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for the call,
calling, Barbara. Yay!
Facebook.
All right, welcome back to KLEAN Radio. We're having a fun time today.
Yes, we are, as always.
Welcome, Mike Muratore. Welcome, Mike. You got to really pull the mic up.
All right.
There you go.
Right there.
There you go. Good.
Hi, Mike.
I notice a lot of people that come into the studio have an aversion to the microphone.
You know what?
Well, it's big and black, so.
This is a
And it's in
very
your face.
large microphone.
And they're tough to work.
Well, welcome to Real Radio.
Right.
This is I know.
This is
people-
radio.
I know,
Internet.
right. This
But the
isn't
funny
like.
thing is, the mics probably on an internet station are better. They're multi-directional, and they're
Well,
so
they're
cheap
tiny.
now. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so the quality doesn't have to be as high to stream on the internet.
It just looks better like this, okay?
This is authentic.
Right.
This is
old
authentic.
school.
This
The
is
real
this is
thing.
like
old school.
yeah. It's
So
like
we just had our call from Barbara, and she was talking about are there legitimate uses for drugs and the alternating of consciousness.
well, I
And
think there's legitimate uses of everything.
Exactly. And I think different cultures do handle substances in different ways. I mean, certainly there's whole cultures built around the ritualization and the ritualized use of drugs in ways that aren't as destructive as the way we do. I mean, we ritualize the use of alcohol by binge drinking in college, and then, progressive alcoholism. It's not.
But I mean,
there are also people that don't have addictive personalities that can handle it. A friend of mine just has cancer and was just given a medical marijuana card, and it's just started. And she doesn't have an addictive personality, so it's going to be okay for her. It wouldn't be an option for me.
I'd be really offended if I God forbid, if I had cancer and I had to get the medical marijuana card and I went down to one of these medical marijuana facilities and everybody there is like 21, 22 years old and they have a medical marijuana card for anxiety, or...
I'm just really glad that it was not an option when I was using, because I don't think I ever would have. I've never been in one of those places,
Right.
but I've heard there's like a whole showcase of like
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
you can like
It's
pick
like
your,
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
It's
No,
like-
but
yeah.
better because it's in all these edibles
And it's super,
you can,
super strong.
and you
super
can
strong.
taste
Super strong.
stuff.
Yeah.
They give
Yeah.
tastes like.
Yeah.
They give samples, like
Yeah,
when
like
you walk
Cold
in.
Stone, you can like say, "Can I?" Yeah.
Yeah, I remember in the 80s going to Amsterdam, and they have some pretty cool places in Amsterdam.
Oh,
where
yeah.
I'm sick that I never
know,
got to do that.
They have actual
Order off a
menus.
menu.
Well, maybe you're blessed, because you might
Yeah.
not have, you might never have left Amsterdam.
I
Marijuana
know.
and
I would have
hookers.
ended up like Brad. What was his name? What was that movie where he was walking around the circle and he never got out?
True Romance.
No. The guy who actually died, but
Terminator?
No, the guy
Sleepless in Seattle?
was in Amsterdam.
Oh, Brad Davis, Midnight Express.
Midnight Express, and he was smuggling the pot out.
Who died of AIDS, sadly.
Much more
He did,
good.
yeah.
Who sadly died of AIDS.
What do you think of performance-enhancing drugs? You think they should be legalized? Like
Sure.
for athletes? Because everybody does them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of ridiculous, the idea that somehow,
No, it's all the nanny. It's all the nanny society. It's like, if somebody wants to go and use these performance-enhancing drugs, go for it.
I personally, what somebody does to their own body doesn't really bother me.
Right, and I get to
It's
watch
like-
great football players,
Yeah.
and we serves both purposes. They play great football.
Yeah, and you can't tell me that NFL players aren't using steroids.
They all do them. That's
right?
the point I'm trying
Yeah.
to make. So when they get busted, what your opinion is, should they all be... I think they should all be legal.
Well, at this
across the
point,
board.
it's
Yeah,
just
but doesn't
kinda
that stuff make
ridiculous.
people like crazy, aggressive,
but they're
insane?
all doing it anyway. It doesn't really... I mean, it's an irrelevant point. They're all doing it anyway.
Well, you'd have to be crazy aggressive to play football anyways, so I don't really know how much the...
Yeah, but if they're amping it up, I don't know.
I don't know either, since I never obviously abused...
Well, let's talk about cocaine, right? Cocaine is a horrible drug. I mean, there's really not too many positive things that you can get out of cocaine.
You
Nobody,
get skinny.
You can get
I was
skinny.
really
Talk
skinny. Yeah,
right?
really skinny.
And about nothing.
And you can listen to the air around your head for a while.
Right. So, should cocaine be legalized?
Well, you're the one that's pro legalization of every drug.
Well, I think because the effects of having them be illegal are worse than making them legal.
I don't know. I told you recently I was in Vancouver, and as we were driving down the street with a few of my friends, they were like, "Oh, that's where everybody shoots up," and I was like, "Where?" You know, I'm looking for like a corner, and it was in a
public health shooting gallery,
right? Where nurses give them heroin, where.
Right.
And
heroin or methadone? They
heroin.
give them heroin?
Well, it's legalized in England,
actually,
too.
they don't give them drugs, actually.
They have to bring their own,
drugs,
right.
But they give them a clean needle,
right.
And then if they overdose, they have Narcan, which will immediately bring them back to life.
it was quite the uplifting.
Nice.
It was quite the uplifting building.
But they also, what you're not telling them is that there's several floors, so they also have progressive levels of people that might want to limit their use, where they have groups and help.
It wasn't that I wasn't telling them, I didn't know that.
And then they also have therapy for people that want to become abstinent and sober. So it's really, truly a public health model where you say this activity is going on, people are overdosing constantly on the streets, we can't stop the use of this drug, so let's make an active effort to try and control the public health hazards of transmission of HIV, Hep C, and other blood transmissible
Has
diseases.
anybody done any research on what their sobriety rate is in relation to contrast to
what
ours?
they found is that actually by doing this, they greatly reduce the number of overdose deaths.
I'm hearing that, but
yeah.
are people getting sober?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah?
people are getting sober, yeah. And I think that, there's obviously more active involvement of treatment and treatment availability. Also, you have, in a lot of ways, a lot of diagnosis of psychiatric illnesses that otherwise wouldn't go diagnosed. So
That's interesting. I never thought of that.
Well, so much of addiction is self-medicating, which leads
Absolutely.
to addiction. And so if you actually have a way to meet people that are actively using in a non-threatening environment, then you can act as a therapist, you can join with that person in the state that they're in, even if it's during active addiction, and then talk to them about what the alternatives are and make the possibilities of getting better less scary. And if you can identify that, oh, you know what, you might actually be bipolar and be self-medicating a mood disorder, and we have this medication that will help with that, and then the symptoms of their mood disorder go away, all of a sudden sobriety seems like a realistic solution. They're not scared of getting sober and then being mentally ill.
But when addicts are in the throes of their disease, do they really want to be in a controlled environment?
Apparently in Canada they do.
Yeah, well, Canada,
that's like great.
it's the Canadians, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was
all about nice.
It was an odd.
nice, right?
It was a very odd thing for me to see. I had very because, and I said, it's like in New York, at least you see the neighborhoods, or not anymore, but or probably still, but you'd go through the village and you'd see the hardship.
Right.
There, I almost think it's like sort of burying it under the rug, even though, I mean, listen, I could be wrong. I don't know.
Well, I think there's several key elements that underlie why people become addicted. If we go from abuse into addiction. One, I think that there's some level of suicidal sort of behavior. Suicidality. It's not quite the right word.
Andrew has a hard time with the words.
Right here, I'll just screw up for half an hour.
We'll give you some coke.
Right?
You'll talk.
Yeah, right.
You'll get it.
And the number here is 877. 877. Let me just give the number. 877-830-830. That's 877-830-830.
That's like the weirdest way to say a phone number that I've ever heard.
Suicidality. There we go.
Suicidality.
It's the only way I can remember the number.
Sounds hot.
That 8
Right.
all by itself.
So
Yeah.
people generally, whether consciously or not, are trying to kill themselves at some level of addiction. So
I think that's 100%.
right. I mean, if you're actively using and it's destroying your life and killing you, that's suicidal behavior.
Yes.
It's long drawn out suicide. As Ozzy Osbourne said, suicide solution, right? I mean, that was a metaphor for alcohol. So,
I wasn't suicidal. I just wanted to anesthetize.
okay, and then, I didn't go through all my points. So then
Okay.
the other group that I see is just the escapist element of it.
That was me.
Right. So most people there's the escapist element as well, where I just want to get away from everything. This allows me not to think, and those people we tend to find have anxiety disorders, where they worry a lot, they have OCD, they have chronic depression, where they have ruminating thoughts. So we see a lot of.
I don't think it's always with a mental disorder.
It's not always, but I'm just saying of the people that we see that have mental disorders, that's what we see. And then the amphetamine abuse we normally see with people with thought disorders, people that are schizophrenic, are just drawn to amphetamines.
Is that so?
Yeah.
I loved cocaine. That's an amphetamine, right?
That's an amphetamine, yeah.
So it's like thought disorders?
Yeah, people that this I'm talking about.
We did drive with you in the car.
Yeah,
so
we know you. We know you have a
fairly safe to say you do have a thought
That's what I was
disorder.
talking about, like violence and stuff. I always thought about violence.
No, but Andrew, I think if somebody's listening might misunderstand. You're not saying that addiction and mental illness don't coincide. You're not saying that if you're abusing drugs that you're not an addict.
No, I'm saying that I'm saying that there's several things. My point was that there's a lot of use of substances that are self-medicating that become abusive and then become addiction that start off from an underlying psychiatric disorder.
Because there's no way heroin.
That was one point I'm making, right? The second point that I was making is that I don't know. Now you blew it for me. What was the point that you just made?
That certain drugs are automatically phically addictive.
No, that was
not my point.
That's a completely different
What kind of
one.
help are you here? Why do I have you?
Well,
I don't think all addiction
your guide.
is
right. My guide.
I don't think all addiction is born from mental disorder.
That's right. Yeah,
that was your
absolutely
other
not.
point.
That was
is
my
that,
other point.
Yeah.
He had a lot of points.
A lot
How
of
about
points.
genetic? You think a lot of it's genetic? I think some of it's genetic.
Yeah, I think that there's clearly some people you see you see them take that first drink of alcohol and you can just see it in their eyes.
That was me.
They change.
That was me.
And then
My whole
it's
family's
off to the
alcoholics.
races. Yeah,
That was me.
There's definitely, and that's alcohol specific. The problem is now we see so much polysubstance abuse where people are coming in on a whole panoply of different medications, prescription drugs. And then now we have marijuana, which as we've been mentioning is much stronger than it's ever been.
It's ridiculous.
And there's all sorts of types of marijuana. It's not like there's just one strand that sort of acts one way. And so we see a lot of drug-induced dementia and paranoia from marijuana. Crystal meth has changed the whole landscape of amphetamine abuse. We still have cocaine out there, and we still have crack, and we still have alcohol. But less and less do we see alcohol as the primary problem.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's
So it's
amazing.
like a combination.
That's why I said to you in the
Yeah.
car, I'm a dinosaur. I'm one of the rare few people that when you listen to their stories, alcohol is the primary.
Well, a lot of it, I believe, is cultural because we've raised the drinking age to 21, and yet you can get prescription drugs over the internet, mailed to your house. But
who has trouble getting alcohol in this society?
You'd be surprised. A lot of people do. It's a lot easier and you could ask most young people that come in young that it's easier for them to get drugs than it is for them to get alcohol.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah,
That was so not the case.
No, it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case in mine either. I mean,
the other thing is you can take a prescription drug and it's harder for people to know what you're doing.
You could also rob your parents' cabinet.
Med cabinets.
Yeah,
Or rob your parents.
Yeah, but you rob your parents' liquor cabinet too.
Yeah, but
you can take a Vicodin and odds of your parents knowing what's wrong with you versus you drinking a bunch of
Because you don't
vodka.
smell.
Yeah,
The
there's no
odor
smell,
right there.
Yeah,
That's a.
you can go to school on amphetamine and
And again, with the marijuana cards, you have 18, 19-year-old people with medical marijuana cards.
Are they giving cards to kids? I know nothing about this.
I think
Can an
21,
18-year-old?
actually.
21.
Yeah, okay.
21.
But it's easy. They pass it out. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, and I passed this one store. It said the person was in there in a white outfit diagnosing, and then you walk over to, I just looked in the window, but then you just walk over and you buy it. So anybody can just walk in off the street, and this person in this white outfit, whoever they
It's
are.
a real doctor.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, who is a weed dealer anymore? That's like that's like using the public phone.
Well,
Like, do they even exist? Like, is there a need? Like, if you sell weed, you're like just out. You're like, you might.
Really?
You're like a
Cliche.
bookie. You're like a bookie that doesn't have an online thing. It's
or
like
you've moved up in the hierarchy, and now you're into real distribution.
right. That's you're right. You're driving down from
Right.
with truckloads of
From British Columbia to
right.
the dispensaries.
Yeah, but otherwise.
Can they sell to the medical marijuana people? No,
Yeah,
medical-
They can.
These are where a lot of the laws are very
12
shaky
pounds.
because if you get caught, I mean, there's a whole.
Right, there's something called preemption. So what preemption means is that one law actually supersedes the other. So
Right.
So at the state level, marijuana is still illegal.
Right.
And then at the federal level,